So today we're going to talk about chord melody, which last week we talked about what I call melodic picking, which is where you're playing with the thumb. And we're still going to be working quite a bit with that this week. But chord melody is where we add an extra layer to it so that we can essentially do all of the different parts of a song all at once. Now, before we start with that, we need to start to put some melody and chord stuff together. So in the last few weeks, we worked a little bit with some strumming and picking with When the Saints Go Marching In. And last week, we just sort of started to mention how you can play the melody with that. So we're going to play just the basic melody of this and try to put some chords to it too, so that we can hear how these two different parts can merge together. So what I want you to do is pick up your ukulele and just practice this riff with me. The first part of the song, we're only going to play the first, "Oh, When the Saints." That's it. So we're going to start with the open C string, and then open on the E string, 1 on the E string with the index finger, and then 3 on the E string with the ring finger. And that's all we're playing to start. It's just, "Oh, when the saints." Now, the reason why we're only playing this is because we're going to combine some strumming with that little part. So it sounds something like this. Kind of cool, right? Because now it's not just the melody, not just what's being sang, but it's also that chord part that's going on behind it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat this. I'm going to play it again and again and again. And we haven't even talked about what I'm doing for strumming, because all I want you to do is try playing the melody with me and then kind of listen to the strumming and collect yourself as you get ready to play that melody again. So essentially, I want you to play, and then I'm going to play this. Pretty cool, right? Because it sounds like now we're playing a duet, but really you're just playing one of the two parts I'm playing. And even as I play by myself, it kind of sounds like a duet, doesn't it? Let's go ahead and try this together using those strums. This can be a little bit intense at first, but we're going to play that little riff. "Oh, when the saints." And then we're going to go down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And then we're going to repeat it. We're going to play, "Oh, when the saints, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Oh, when the saints, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Oh, when the saints, down, up, down, up, down, up, down." Again, that down, up, down, up, down, up, down, we're playing that C chord that we played before, which is just the ring finger here on the 3rd fret. So it's pretty tricky because we have to switch back and forth, and it can feel like a lot. In fact, it feels a little bit like this when we start doing it, and that's normal. It's a different type of feeling. So what we're doing here is we're playing the chords, and we're playing the melody. So this is an example of a little chord melody section. So what does chord melody mean? Well, it's where you play all the parts of the song at the same time. And the different parts of a song, well, the two most important parts when we listen to music are going to be the melody, which is whatever's sang, and the harmony, which is really whatever else is going on in the background. And that harmony, the most common type of harmony we see, are chords. Chords and harmony are kind of synonymous in a lot of situations, including this one. This down, up, down, up, down, up, down that I'm playing behind it, that's the harmony part, the chords that are in the background. While this is our melody. And when we put them together, we get that chord melody sort of style. Which can sound really nice. Now with this comes the responsibility to try to trick the listener. And what I mean is, if we play everything at the exact same volume with the exact same tone, it doesn't sound as good. We want to create the sense of a band behind us. If you imagine somebody playing the piano and someone singing, how can you tell when somebody's singing versus playing the piano? Well, it's pretty easy. One sounds like a voice and the other sounds like a piano. There's no real mistaking those two instruments. So it's really easy to identify that melody versus that harmony, not just in terms of what they're playing, but how they sound when they're playing it. The problem is when we're playing the ukulele, it sometimes gets merged together, because how do you know the difference between an ukulele and an ukulele? Well, it's a little harder because it's not quite as big of a difference as a piano to a vocalist. So using the strumming here and playing the strumming really softly, more in the background, while using the picking for the melody and making it more forward and in front, can help create that sense of a duet of two people playing. If I played them all at the same volume, you hear the strumming kind of overpowers it and it gets lost. Having those little bit of dynamics can really help because they already sound so similar. So in a very, very small nutshell, that is chord melody. It's just the act of taking the melody of a song and the chords or the harmony and starting to combine them a bit. In this particular case, in this exercise, we played the melody by itself, and then we played the chords by themselves, but we played them adjacent to one another, right? We played the melody, and then we played the chords. That's a very good way to play chord melody, but not the only way. The other way, which is actually more common, is where you actually splice these parts all together. Instead of them sitting adjacent, they start to go together a little bit more. And that might sound something like this. You can hear that now. It's a little bit less rhythmic, but I've got more of the chord and melody working together. And so to play this, what we're going to do is we're going to play our open C, and then our open on the E, the 1 on the E. And then at the moment of this 3 on the E that we play for the melody, we're going to reinforce it with a chord. And the chord that should be played here is a C major chord. But if we play just our C major chord, the melody gets lost because our melody note is this 3 on the E, this what we call G note in that scale. And if I play a C chord, as I normally do here, and I just strum through it, well, now my melody note, the one at least that we're perceiving as a melody note, is this note here, the 3 on the A, which is a C note, and that's no good. So we need to splice the melody within the chord. And what we do is we add that 3 on the E, that's the G melody note, and we strum our G, C, and E strings, stopping on the A string, not playing it, because we want the last note to ring to be the melody. Now this kind of cuts up the chord, right? This is not as full as this, but that's how we start to combine these things. And that's what makes chord melody really confusing and really complicated to learn, especially when you're learning it just by ear and trying to figure it out that way. I don't really recommend that being the primary way you learn chord melody because it's so hard, but that's kind of the gist of what's going on. Now, if you want to learn more about how to play chord melodies and find different arrangements, one of the best resources around is the internet. It's where most people are learning these days. It's also where I'm teaching. And the most, cohesive way of teaching how to read these chord melodies is through something called tab or tablature. Now, tab oftentimes has a really negative stereotype to it. And that drives me a little nuts because I love tab. Tab is fantastic. The problem with reading sheet music on the ukulele is that this instrument has multiple ways of playing the same note. So if you know how to play any other instruments, like a piano, for instance, you might read a note of a C on a piece of music, and hey, on my piano, I can play that C note right here. And then you see an A note, it's like, oh, it's right here. And I look at that as an ukulele player, and I'm like, oh, an A note, great. Well, do you want me to play this one? Or do you want me to play this one? Or do you want me to play this one? Or do you want me to play this one? Which one of these 4 would you like me to play? And the answer on the sheet music side isn't there because sheet music isn't really made for the ukulele in that way. Tablature, on the other hand, shows you exactly which fret number to play on which string so that you don't have to guess anymore. Is it as complete as sheet music? Not really, but it's more accurate for the ukulele. It gives you more information for this instrument, and it makes it a very, very helpful tool when you're learning, especially learning chord melody. So we have to learn how to read tab because that's the trick to learning chord melody, is learning how to read tab. And to do this, we're going to look at my iPad here, which is my whiteboard. And there's 4 lines. Well, what does that mean? Well, 4 lines, 4 strings, probably a relationship there, right? And if you think there is, you would be correct. Each one of these lines represents a different string on my ukulele. The confusing part about tab is the outline of the strings. Because on our ukulele, our string closest to the top is our G string, and then we have our C string, and then our E string, and then our A string. And on tablature, it's kind of upside down, which I know seems so confusing. And if you ask me why, I couldn't answer. Tab's actually one of the oldest forms of music, but it just kind of is what it is. I will tell you though, when you get comfortable with it, it makes a lot of sense. Kind of like typing on a keyboard, right? Does the QWERTY keyboard thing really make intuitive sense? Not at first, but when you get used to it, it starts to be easy to use. So this first line right here, this is our A. And so with this, I'm going to write the letter A next to it, just so that you can see, hey, that's our A string. And then it's our E string, our C string, and our G string for our G, C, E, and A. The way that I like to think about this to make it a little bit easier to think through is that if you're sitting there with tab on the table and you look down at your ukulele, then your A string is kind of on top, right? Because as you look down, the uke kind of turns upside down, right? So if you hold the ukulele like this and you hold the tab like this, they end up being the same, right? So that's one way of looking at it, but it's still a little bit confusing. The most important thing is just to try to get consistent. Okay, this is the G, this is the C, this is the E, and this is the A. Now, I mentioned numbers. Well, we've got these awesome fret marker numbers on our ukulele, and so we're going to use those with tab to be able to know exactly what to play and where to play it. So if you see something like this in tab, where it might say something like this is a little run in tab. What's shown here is you go from left to right, read it like a book, and we start here with our C and we play the 0 fret. So all that we do is we play our C string open, and that's it. And that's all that's there on this playing. So we move on to the next one, and now that's 0 on the E. We're going to play that. And then we're going to play 1 on the E, and then we're going to play 3 on the E. And if you play these notes, the 0 on the C, the 0 on the E, the 1 on the E, and the 3 on the E, it would sound something like this. So we've got 0, 0, 1, and 3. Hey, that's When the Saints, the very thing we've been working on and just played for a little bit so that you can get comfortable with. That's how it would be written in tab. And this is great because if I said play the notes C, E, F, G, that might be a little bit more tricky because, again, do I play my C note here? Well, I have to this is the only place this C note can be played, but this E note can be played 2 places. The F note can be played 2 places, and the G note can be played 3 places. It's crazy. With the tab, we can see exactly what to play and when to play it. Now, there's a lot more to tab than this, and the most common thing that you see is multiple numbers on the same row. And that looks something like this in the most common situation. You'll notice this is exactly the same as what I wrote out just a moment ago, but now we have 0 and 0 with that 3. We want to consider that that 0 is on the G string and on the C string and the 3 on the E. You notice how these are each individual on their own lines, but then these 3 are all together. What that means is that you want to play all of those at the same time. Now, as I said before, tab is not perfect. So how do you play all 3 at the same time? Well, the tab doesn't really tell you in this case, right? Sometimes tabs will use different markers and things to show you what to do. But in this case, we don't really know just based on what's written here. So there's a couple different things we can do. We can go back to our second lesson, or third lesson rather, where we talked about finger picking. Remember we worked on the 3 finger picking. Well, I could pluck my G with my thumb, maybe move my index up to my C and my middle on my E and pluck those 3 at the same time. That would be a great way to play those 3 strings using finger picking. Alternatively, we can strum through them with our thumb using the melodic picking technique we talked about last week and we're working on this week. We could strum through our G, C, and E, kind of stop on the A string. And you'll notice that's what I like to do with this, is I like to bring my thumb down and actually physically stop it on the A string so that I can get that sound. And that's tab, and again, a kind of small nutshell, but enough to kind of get you going. One of the most important things about tab and learning on the internet is trusting that you can't trust everyone. What I mean is if you find a tab online, and for the most part, it really works and you love it, but there's that one note that just doesn't sound right, don't think that you're wrong all the time. Question the tab, because odds are good most of the tabs you're going to find online are not perfect, because most of the people that are making them aren't perfect either. And so it's really important to kind of trust that what you're looking at is what you're hoping it will be, but also know that it's not the only way. This is the only thing that you should do. And if you don't play this note, you're wrong. Trust your ear a little bit and play off of that. It's okay when you're working on this stuff to experiment a little bit and to not take the tab as this is the only way it can be done. But this is a very, very simple way of looking at tab so that you can start to play with it. I love using tab for different things. And if you click on the links down below, if you're watching this as a recording, you can find some examples for some tabs that we've done here that you can just kind of start working through. The complexity of a song, you can usually tell within the tab, because if there are lots of zeros and ones, twos, and threes, maybe a couple fives, it's probably pretty easy. If you see a lot of nines, 10s, 12s, 15s, might not be as easy, especially when the numbers are jumping all over the place. But tab, I'd be lost without it. I use it all the time. I use it in all my teaching. I think it's just a fantastic way to get comfortable with knowing what to play and when to play it. So we've looked at this When the Saints Go Marching In, forgot the name of the song. And we've talked now about how we can add some chords to it to create this sort of chord melody style and playing. But there's a lot of different ways that you can layer this in. We can do the strumming, like what we worked on here, which is combining the melodic picking from last week with the strumming that we worked on in the first couple weeks. You alternatively could also do something like finger picking with it. And what I'm doing there is I'm going back to some of the finger picking that we introduced, doing some of like that 3-finger picking back and forth. That's another thing that can kind of be layered in to create these different sort of sounds. And so when you're looking at a piece of tab, that's a chord melody of something, you can usually see, oh, this is more strumming based, or this is more finger picking based, or this is more melodic picking based. Kind of pick how you want to play it, pick, pun intended, as you're going through it. Now, if you want to take When the Saints Go Marching In and try working through it, you can look at the chords, get really comfortable with those. So if you can sing, oh, when the saints go marching in, oh, when the saints go marching in G7, right? Well, how I'd like to be in that F, C, G7, right? That's sort of what we worked on in that first one. You can use those chords and then you can try to find the melody, like what we talked about a little bit last week. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Right? And from there, you can start to put some chords in between the space that you might find. So that might sound something like this. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in. How I like, right? You can see how now what I'm doing is taking those spaces that exist in the melody, just adding some chords to it in between. Chord melody, using the two together. When I play the chords and there's no melody note with them, I play it a little bit softer to make it more in the background. I just skipped ahead many weeks of practice with that exercise. But the point to it is that it's okay to keep it simple, and it's okay to experiment to try to find what works and what doesn't as you go through. This is all playing more by ear, which truthfully, I'm not the biggest fan of, not because I think it's bad. I think it's fantastic, but because I'm really bad at it. When I was learning how to play the ukulele and learning how to do music, just when music teachers would say, just hear it and play it, I'd get so frustrated because I couldn't just do that. So for me, what helped was finding tabs, finding things that are all tabbed out so that I could work on them on my own pace and get comfortable with it. Again, if you're watching this as a recording, there's a link down to playing this song with a tab that you can work through to be able to start getting comfortable with this concept of chord melody and playing it with tab. Now, one more note I want to talk about. I mentioned the whole concept of chord melody being basically chords are harmony, melody is melody, and how melody and harmony really create songs. There's one more element to what creates a song, and that is the rhythm to the song. Those three pieces, melody, harmony, and rhythm, are the secrets to making a really good song. And the reason we didn't talk about rhythm as much here is because we can kind of get the sense of the rhythm through whatever we're strumming. And the rhythm is oftentimes sort of implied within the chords and the harmony and the melody. It's kind of already in there. There's already a rhythm to that, which kind of goes without saying. But my favorite way to think about how to create these arrangements in the different parts is to imagine somebody singing with the ukulele. So if we're singing When the Saints Go Marching In, we can identify these three different parts really easily. Whatever's being sung is the melody. Oh, when the saints, that's the melody part. Whatever is being fretted with the left hand or the fretting hand, that's the harmony, or in this case, the chords, the background, the stuff that adds texture to whatever the melody is. And then the rhythm, that's this sucker right here. It's the strumming hand as it goes through. So if I go, oh, when the saints go marching in, I've got my melody through what I'm singing, I've got my harmony through the chords that I'm playing, and I've got my rhythm through my strumming. And if you try and do all those things at the same time to create that chord melody style, you certainly can, but it becomes that much harder because it's a bit of a juggling act. And that's where tab comes into play, is it's such a great way for us to be able to see exactly what to play and when to play it. So in our next session, we're going to be talking a little bit more about how we can wrap all of these things up so that we can put a nice bow on it and see where you can go from here to continue your ukulele journey. So I'm going to open it up now for any questions you guys might have. This is kind of a loaded concept, and I always feel bad because I feel like I'm going light speed through some of those parts. But the point is less to be playing this and more just to become aware of what it is so that when you're looking online, you can know exactly what to look for. So any questions at all? And that's fine too. Let me see. Oh, there's a chat. There we go. Dee said you aren't good at playing by ear. So what's your process for the tabs that you write on Patreon? Fantastic question. Sheet music. I find the music online as it's been written out for piano or whatever other instrument that I can find. And it's a math problem. And so yeah, like with Moonlight Sonata, I pulled up a piano arrangement of the song, and I from there made it on the ukulele. I did study music theory in college, and that was my sort of education and the skill. And through teaching, I've refined that skill so I can do it quickly. But the process is very much the same. Just because I can look at notes and do it very fast, figure out what to do, doesn't mean that process itself is any different. And so if you're new at this and you're trying to get comfortable with creating chord melodies or whatever else, pull up a chord chart or a fretboard map, excuse me, that shows you all the notes on the fretboard. If you know how to read music, you can go through that sort of process. If you don't know any of that stuff, I strongly recommend finding tabs of songs that are already done online, because that's going to be the best way to start getting comfortable with it. To be completely honest, this type of playing is where most people stop because it's harder than what we've done to this point. Playing just chords, finger picking, and strumming, it's not easy, but it's only two of the three parts, right? It's the rhythm and the harmony. So when we start to implement the melody, well, last week we just played the melody, right? That wasn't so hard, but when we do melody and the chords and the rhythm all at once, it becomes very hard. So tab can be a great way to show you what to do. That's where watching teachers and different things like that can help too. Jenny says, do you have any free-form exercises that you recommend with melodies, harmony, and rhythms? Like which songs may be good to try this juggling act? Yeah, so generally speaking, if you're able to find a song that you know the chords to really comfortably, and you can pick out the melody on the ukulele, especially when you can pick out the melody more on the A string, because if you pick it out on the A string, whatever's played on the G, C, and E, it doesn't matter. If they're the chord and then the A string is the melody and you strum through, it all works. That was my one piece of reluctance in picking the When the Saints Go Marching In this key, is it's all kind of on the C and the E strings. It's a lot more inner. It makes it much more approachable at first, but makes it harder for this exercise in some ways. So if I were to play the same song in the key of G, let's say, you know, and go, oh, so now I have the opportunity of my melody. And then what's it called? I have the opportunity for that melody to be a little bit more accessible with the harmony instead of it buried in where the harmony would be, where the chords are. So finding a song that you're comfortable with, that you can kind of pick it out with, and being very gracious with yourself. Very gracious with yourself, because this is a process and I'm decades into this process right now. And that's why it can be so frustrating watching me, where it's like, oh, he's just picking it out. It's like, it's just time. The only difference between myself and anyone watching this is I've had more time. And so that's all there really is to it. And so don't be afraid of failure, because you won't find what sounds good if you don't find what sounds bad first. And so yeah, the other exercises with that is find a tab of something that you like and then reverse engineer it. And what I mean by that is see if you can find the chords from the tab and strum and sing just from the tab. It might not say any chord names at all, but it's like, oh, hey, I recognize that. That's an F chord, or that's a G. Well, if I strum this and sing it, oh, there we go. And that gives you another side of the sort of coin to kind of work off of. So any other questions at all? Again, this whole talk today, I'm always, I want to just dive into a chord melody. And that's not what this is about as much as it is being able to identify chord melody and know what there is. And if you want to dive into them, you can always check out my YouTube channel too. If you just go to youtube.com/ I think it's The Jumping Flea, but if you just type in my name, Matt Dahlberg, on YouTube, it'll pop right up. And I've done over 50 full song tutorials of different things like this, teaching the style. Some are more advanced, some are much more beginner, but it's this style and this sound. I don't like to sing personally, as I mentioned earlier in the thing. So I like the chord melody style because it lets me do all of it on the ukulele, because this thing always sounds good, unlike me. Sometimes that's not the case. So any other questions at all? I think I've gotten through the ones in the chat, and cool. Well, I will see you guys next week for the final episode of this. We'll be talking more about some of the things we talked about today, and then kind of where to go from here, how to find different things to take your ukulele playing to those next levels. And then again, we're recording all of this externally. So this is going to be available kind of as a little course. The Q&As at the end are kind of limited just to these recordings here for the Zoom recordings, but the YouTube ones will be cut up a little bit more and stuff. So excited for that. Well, thank you so much. Have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See ya.
La 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 la.